Before we start registering service consumption, let's first have a look at some additional setup which might be convenient for these processes. So let's have a look where we can set up the service order starting fees and travel fees. Let's have a look what we need to do with the base calendar, and let's also have a look at settings for the copying of a timesheet to orders. To work with starting fees and travel fees on your service orders, you need to configure service costs. So in Dynamics NAV, let's search for service costs, and then we open up the service cost window to configure the service costs. You can see here that multiple service costs have already been pre-configured in the demo database, but of course you can configure any service cost you want. There are three types actually of costs. You have travel and other, and you also have support costs, which are possible. So here you see in this example here, the starting fee has a cost type of other. All the other service costs are linked with travel. And what is the difference? Well, typically you see that the travel service costs are also linked with a service zone. And a service zone is a geographical zone in which you have divided your territory. So you see here travel east, travel mid, travel north, southeast, south and west, and they are linked with east, mid, north, southeast, south and west service zones. For the costs, typically you see that an account, a GL account, is also configured. You get the default quantity, you get the unit of measure, you get a unit cost and a unit price. So before you can start to work with starting fees and travel fees, you have to configure them as service costs. Before you start working more and more in detail with your service orders and service requests, you also need to check your service management setup again, and this time for the base calendar code in this case. For service, you are able to configure a base calendar, which is different from your default base calendar. Why? Because it might be the case that you have different working and non-working days for your service department than for your general department. And that's the reason why you can configure a specific base calendar for service. So you can select your base calendar from a list. In this case, we have a one specifically for service, which is assigned here. And you can also check what the content is of that base calendar. And you see here that you have, for a specific time period, you have working and non-working days defined, which is, of course, for service, very important. With the copy timesheet to order parameter, you enable the automatic transition of approved timesheet lines to the service lines of a service order. So when you check mark this, like in this example, and later on when you're going to make a timesheet for a specific resource, or a resource is going to make a timesheet, and they are going to pinpoint their time to a specific service order and then get approval for this timesheet, then at that moment, those approved timesheet lines for the service order become automatically service lines for a service order. And you don't have to do anything anymore. It happens automatically. If you uncheck this, then there will not be any automatic conversion of these timesheet lines to your service lines of the service order. Then you need to use a function to retrieve those lines. But if you check mark it, it happens automatically.